Hi everyone, I'm Jenna, and today I will be discussing the power of feedback in instructional communication. So, feedback in general describes information and a response message, basically what the person did well and what they did not do so well. General feedback research dates back over a century and started with Edward Lee Thorndike's law of effect. This law of effect explains that behaviors leading to satisfying outcomes are likely to be repeated, while behaviors with unsatisfying outcomes are less likely to be repeated. So, Thorndike was a psychologist, and therefore, feedback research comes from a very psychological background, much like basically all the other contexts in communication and specifically instructional communication. So, they were looking at how and why human behavior can occur, whereas we're focused more on the communication aspect of it. So, it went through several stages of research before it was applied specifically to instructional communication. So, some key facts about instructional feedback. Instructional feedback is often considered a primary component of the teacher-student relationship. So, I'm sure we can all think of a teacher or two who we've had who has given either really good feedback or not so good feedback. And that's kind of what we remember them for. So, it's really important in terms of that relationship. Evaluation includes feedback related to student performance and the identification of areas for improvement to meet standards. So that's basically saying that feedback should include things that the student did really well, as well as areas they can improve upon. And along those lines, performance can only be improved when knowledge of less than optimal behavior is communicated. So that is one of the most important reasons why we need to consider feedback when it comes to instructional communication, is that we need to know what we need to improve on before moving on with our studies. Along with that, feedback is an indispensable component of communication, and it's an essential concept specifically in instructional communication. There's a lot of research done on it. So, feedback specifically in the instructional communication context. Instructional context, feedback takes on a more specific technical definition, usually referred to as instructional feedback or feedback interventions, or FIs. FIs are described by Kluger and Denisi as actions taken by external agents to provide information regarding some aspects of one's task performance. That's basically saying that you need to have information on what they did well and what they did not do so well on when it comes to your feedback. So FIs change the locus of attention among three general and hierarchically organized levels of control. These are task learning, task motivation, and metatask, including self-related processes. So depending on the specific individual's personality type, positive or negative feedback can have a higher impact on their behavior. Facebook strategies also mitigate self-identity threats. They prevent students' cognitive energy from being diverted to metatask processes and keep the attention focused on task details, which aligns with the theory we will talk about in a minute. So the purpose of FIs are to provide learners with information about their performance. And in 1996, Kluger and Denisi developed the Feedback Intervention Theory, or FIT, or FIT for short. So this is a really important theory in the instructional communication context. So research had been conducted for almost a century prior to Kluger and Denisi, but there were many flaws that needed to be addressed, hence the formation of this theory. FIT was proposed as a hybrid theory to integrate varying perspectives, accounting for the inconsistencies in FI effects. So the 5 basic elements that are included in this theory are the regulation by comparison, hierarchical goals, limited attention, normal locus of attention, and change of locus. But that's kind of where this theory stopped. I mean, there is more. If you want to get into it, I highly suggest looking up. But they didn't really include a measurement or a scale, which is where the instructional feedback orientation scale comes in. Designed to expand upon FIT, IFOS offers a tool that would be invaluable in determining who might respond positively to instructional feedback and under what circumstances such responses might occur, thereby informing FIT. So this basically is just kind of like a survey that can hopefully predict and explain who exactly will respond positively to positive feedback and who will respond negatively. So the development of the IFOS followed standard psychometric protocol involving two major studies. Study 1 was the exploratory factor analysis, or EFA, and study 2 was the confirmatory factor analysis, CFA, and final scale. The four-factor solution was confirmed by both EFA and CFA, and this was all developed by King et al. In 2009. So more on the four-factor solution because it is really quite fascinating. So these are the four factors. They include feedback utility, feedback sensitivity, feedback confidentiality, and feedback retention. So more on these specifically. Feedback utility is the first and largest factor accounted for in the greatest proportion of variance. This factor is characterized by students' perceptions that teacher feedback is valuable and useful for improving academic performance. This all makes perfect sense. Again, students can improve if they don't know what they need to improve upon. So it makes it seem that feedback is very useful. Feedback sensitivity is the second factor, and it reflects the emotional or attributional sensitivity students have towards corrective feedback. This includes the degree to which they feel intimidated, threatened, or hurt by corrective comments. So I know I am one that really likes feedback, but there have been certain professors in my past where if I see a Canvas notification from them saying that they left feedback, I got a little scared. So I was a lot more sensitive to their feedback than others because I felt intimidated, threatened, or even hurt depending on the situation. Feedback confidentiality is the third factor, and it measures students' concerns about the public versus private context in which teacher feedback is provided. Students scoring higher on this dimension preferred feedback to be given in private rather than public context. So an example of this could be that I had a class, I mentioned it in our discussion for last week, where the professor would pull up our assignments and kind of berate them in front of the entire class. This was very offensive to all of us. I think it's safe to say that all of us would have very much preferred the private feedback on our assignments and what we could have done better. Granted, there were a lot of other issues with that class, but that's definitely one where it is important to realize that confidentiality is a thing, especially in regards to feedback and grades. The last factor solution is feedback retention. So this measures the degree to which students retain, recall, and make note of the corrective comments they receive from teachers. So instead of getting comment after comment on every single assignment that you're doing the same thing wrong every time, this is saying how students can actually recall and retain this information. So where is feedback study used today, and specifically in the instructional context? So studies on feedback are quite common, as I mentioned earlier. The focus recently a lot has been international studies on EFL and the correlation of feedback, which was really interesting to see. Another area I saw a lot more than I expected was feedback research in regards to music teachers and students. So I thought that was just a really interesting context in which to look at this fascinating subject. And obviously, there's plenty more, but those are the two that really stuck out to me. So thank you all for listening. I'm so excited to dive into our discussions this week, and I can't wait to see what you guys will come up with. Thank you.